Welcome to EPG Pathashala. I am Dr. T.S. Ravishankar, former Director Epigraphy, Archaeological Survey of India, Mysore. The subject is Indian Culture, paper Indian Epigraphy, module Brahmi, Early, Middle, Late Brahmi and Indian Scripts Abroad. The main objective is to understand the Brahmi script, its regional variations over the period of time, and derivatives. Because Brahmi was mainly responsible at later stages, it led to the progression of Siddhamatrika, Kutila, and later Sharda and other scripts, early Nagari and other scripts. It has been classified into three categories: early, medieval, and late Brahmi, and their evolution in course of time, and its characteristic features in different parts of India. To know the Indian scripts employed in the inscriptions from neighboring countries and Southeast Asia. As you all aware, epigraphy forms one of the major primary sources to understand especially our early Indian history. And earlier scholars, they were looking for the political history. And now in the course of time, they shifted their attention, even they tried to tap the epigraphical sources to understand the cultural history, social significance, economic, administrative, many aspects. Especially this is a module connected with the early inscriptions, Brahmi. There are large number of inscriptions available from 3rd century BC to 6th century AD, and later also Brahmi has a long history of evolution starting from 3rd century BC to 12th century. And here we are confining up to 6th century, and a little more attention will be given to say something about the derivatives from Brahmi, as I said, like Siddhamatrika, Kutila, subsequently Sharda, Proto-Bengali, early Nagari and other scripts. Brahmi script is considered as the mother of all the scripts of subsequent period, and it was a pan-Indian script used throughout the length and breadth of the country. All early inscriptions beginning from 3rd century BC to 6th century are written in Brahmi script, classified for our convenience as early, middle and late Brahmi, and they fall in the time brackets from 3rd century BC to 1st century AD. It is called early Brahmi. From 2nd century AD to 4th century AD, it is middle Brahmi, and subsequently from 5th century to 6th century AD, it is late Brahmi. From late Brahmi onwards, there is a progression towards the Kutila script. Sometimes it is also called early Nagari, and it developed into other scripts. First of all, we come to know from Brahmi a set of large number of Ashokan rock edicts found throughout length and breadth of the country, exceptionally not from Tamil Nadu and Kerala, otherwise it is found throughout the Indian subcontinent. Apart from these Ashokan rock edicts, we have a few inscriptions reported from different parts of northern India like Mahastan, Piprava, Saugara and other inscriptions. Mauryan Brahmi, as we have seen, though it has a lot of regional variations, it is called imperial script or Mauryan Brahmi, and this is very, very important. Further, a stage is set for its evolution from the end of the Christian era. Early Brahmi characters are very simple nature. As you know, it is of geometrical nature with a square, circle and vertical stroke. It's very, very simple. Subsequently, it evolved into different forms. Early Brahmi inscriptions range from 3rd century BC to 2nd century BC are written in Prakrit language. It was the lingua franca. Though Sanskrit was there, Ashoka, in his edicts, mainly popularly employed Prakrit inscription so that even a common man could understand the significance of his message in the right perspective. So that's how Prakrit became the lingua franca, and most of the earlier inscriptions, they are written in Prakrit language like Battiprolu, even the early Satavahana inscriptions, even in the south, any part of the country, earlier inscription we find in Prakrit language, it continued as a major language till 3rd century, and in south, the Pallavas, they continued for till 4th century AD onwards. And subsequently, the Sanskrit emerged as one of the major languages, and by the end of the 1st century BC, and during Gupta period, it emerged as one of the major languages, and it continued for many centuries, not only in northern India, even in South India. Many of the major dynasties, they, along with the regional language, they continued to use Sanskrit language as one of the important till medieval, late medieval period and subsequent period also. Prakrit, as we said above, it continued 2nd century in the north and lasted in the South India till 4th century AD. As I mentioned, the Pallavas, for their early copperplate charters, they used Prakrit as a main language. As we observed earlier, though the inscriptions are found almost part of the India with all regional variations, and the Ashokan edicts are called the imperial script, because one major royal charter was there, and he carried all the messages throughout the Indian subcontinent. Two important features we notice in the realm of writing, because with the dismemberment of the Mauryan Empire and the emergence of the native states and the satraps and all, they brought along with them a different media to express their language. The emergence of native states with the disintegration of the Mauryan Empire after Ashoka, they used this script on their coins. Not only in the inscription, we have biscriptal coins and the inscription. And some foreign powers who were confined to northwestern parts of India, the erstwhile Mauryan Empire, also used this inscription on their coins. And this is how it facilitated at later point to decipher Brahmi inscriptions because of the bilingual nature. And Professor Dani has tried to identify different regions based on the different variations in the script. He has tried to identify based on the main characteristics of the letters. He has identified different centers. Regional centers being Eastern India with its main center at Magadha, which formed the nucleus, and it stood for the eastern variety. Eastern India with its center at Magadha. In the northwest, we have the center at Taxila and Mathura, and northwestern Deccan and South India. These are the 4 regions he has tried to identify and categorize them according to the scripts available in different regions. We may notice that in the 1st century BC, there is a acceleration, there is a development in the way of writing. During this century, the knowledge of writing was diffused among the people. During the earlier phase, during the Mauryan period, perhaps a few section of people were aware of the script, but in the course of time, they became aware the art of writing the Brahmi script. So whenever they went to different regions, they tried to record their donations, their gift by way of taking the message of their visit to different places. During this century, the knowledge of writing was diffused among the different people, and during the Mauryan period, the art of writing of Ashokan Brahmi was confined to a small group of scribes. When the Mauryan Empire got dismembered, some private authorities started using the script. More and more people came to know about this art of writing, and they became interested in it. That's how we find by the end of the Christian era and the 1st century AD, we find large number of inscriptions, especially which are of donative nature. A major paradigm shift takes place by the end of the 1st century BC, that is the Kshatrapas. They introduced a new technique altogether. As you know, earlier during the Mauryan phase, a simple tool was used to engrave their edicts or the inscriptions, but subsequently During the Mathura Kshatrapas, they altogether brought a new technique which is called pen technique, and it altered the ways, the forms of the letter, which is very well seen. The above you see there, the Rumindi pillar inscription, very beautifully inscription, where and below you see the other Mathura inscription with the pen technique, how they have equalized the letters and lengthened the verticals, and head marks are seen, which are all very, very important features which will be seen in the subsequent slides. And this is very important aspect. You are seeing above the Mauryan inscription and the Shodasha Mathura inscription, which have a distinct letters altogether, and individual letters got attention and they formed different letters altogether. Mainly the features here, the head marks started appearing. You find the nail head marks and the thick block head marks, and these are, Dani has classified them into three categories, and this is how you find in the further course of the evolution, these marks have become important, and this is one of the very, very important aspect from the earlier Maurya Brahmi, and with the passage of time, how head mark become a very important, significant feature in the formation of the letter is seen in course of this one. And another very important aspect which we have to remember in mind and keep is focused is the verticals. Earlier the letters were of same line, and in the subsequent period they lengthened the vertical stroke, sometime giving a gentle curve and lengthening you see, and head mark also mostly seen on the left side. Here you see on the letter A how the small head mark is seen, and the vertical stroke is lengthened and the curve is there. Similarly, the letter Ka, you find the head mark and the horizontal stroke is taken slightly above and a curve is seen. And similarly, the Ra is also elongated with a small gentle curve. And the another very significant aspect is angularization of curved bottom. Earlier you have seen almost all the Mauryan Brahmi characters are of the cursive nature, and predominantly you see in the later phase they become angularized. The letter Ma, here the lower limb you see that it is of cursive nature, and subsequently you find letter Ma with angularity, and similarly the letter Ka, where the appendage you see is a small circle, but subsequently you find the triangular mark is appended, that becomes Ka, and similarly Va is of roundish type, but whereas in the subsequent field it gets angularized, you find this. And the tendency to equalize the verticals. This is another aspect to be kept in mind. Gha you see here with a cursiveness, whereas in the second phase you find they become angularized, and then Pa you find the left limb, the vertical is longish, but whereas the second phase you find it is equalized. And similarly the La, Ra, Sa is of cursive type and it becomes angularized with a head mark slightly seen above the limb. And La and Ha, these are the cursive, and subsequently how it become angularized, this is one important aspect. And then the medial vowels, it has a very important role, and earlier we find during the Ashokan or Mauryan Brahmi a simple dash is attached to the vowel signs or the consonants. But here you find it is slightly slanting, K, Ka, A, like that. When strokes are become slanted, is how it led to further changes you see in the subsequent period. What we have seen is different. Now you are seeing in a different fashion the vowel markings, especially you are seeing here. Now similarly, as far as E sign is concerned, E and E become rounded, sometimes ornamental. You find here key is written with almost a rounded form, and similarly lengthening also you see in a different way. So you see a distinct shape what you saw in the earlier Mauryan phase, and you see subsequent phase in the Kshatrapa, Kushan, and other records. And medial U is attached here below the vertical stroke. Similarly, Ku, Pu, you see the bend. Earlier, simple dash were attached below, but here it is slanting, and this gave altogether a different forms in the course of its Brahmi's progression when in the further centuries. Another medial sign assumes a curved form here, and subsequently you see the when you attach the O sign, I, Ba, Pau. This is how the medial strokes are attached to gain the I, O, and Au phonetic sound. So after the Mauryan phase, we are coming to the another very important phase in the paleographical studies. That is, with the emergence of the Kushana, they brought in some more changes, because to introduce, when the Sanskrit language became a prominent language, they had to introduce some more sounds to suit the phonetic value. The last quarter of the first century AD, the Kushana Empire made its presence felt in northern India, and we find a large number of inscriptions started appearing in different parts of northern India. Under their patronage, larger number of inscriptions were written in Brahmi. Not only that, but even in Kharoshti, but it was confined to Pakistan and the other northwestern region. By this time, the script had become more popular. As I mentioned earlier, after the dismemberment of the Mauryan Empire and with the emergence of the principal other dynasties, they were becoming more and more aware of the script, and you find people not only that they became interested, and they started their donations, given gifts to the various religious places. Other important factors in the acceleration or in the evolutionary process, these important factors may be kept in mind. The desire for swiftness in writing, which gave rise to cursive forms. For example, there are some inscriptions, the desire for ornamentation, which paved the way for the new shapes, which you find in the Vijayagad inscription from Jaggayapeta, Nagarjunakonda. The desire led to the symmetry in lines. Earlier, no symmetry was there, and subsequently the scribes took a lot of interest to give individual attention to the different forms of the letter, and not only that, they maintained alignment in writing the inscriptions. Along with that, with a sufficient space, they also give space, room for adding flourishes in the letter forms and medial signs. Another factor which we see is the individual habits and the mannerisms, likes and dislikes, methods of forming every letter. So these are the many other contributory factors which brought in changes in the form of letters. So with these tendencies, in places like we find in Sanchi, Mathura, Kaushambi, Saranath, Shravasti, and many other places, they became important centers of writing. As we have identified earlier, they are the places with large number of inscriptions with their own distinctness. So that's how they could be classified, and they have proved to be the important places. Now the Brahmi, in the earlier, as you know, there are no regional variations, but subsequent paleographers, when they could see a large number of inscriptions coming from different directions, they try to notice changes in the formation of letters. Now the Brahmi script that is found, they try to classify east and west. That is, Mathura became the center for the western style, the Kaushambi led to the eastern region. Even though the differences in these two schools are limited to a few letters, but the distinction is clear. So it's not necessary the entirety they not be changed, but certain letters you definitely see a distinct forms appearing, which will be seen in future. This one. So the Eastern style, we have the centers at Kaushambi, Sahet Mahet, and Saranath. In the Eastern style, you may predominantly see the head mark is not to be seen, but tapering verticals. This is a very, very important characteristic feature of the inscriptions which are seen in the Eastern style. They lack head mark. But you find, on the other hand, a long tapering vertical without head mark. So it recalls the style of Mathura Kshatrapas. Just we have seen above how the verticals were extended, of course, with a very slight head mark appearing above. And in the Kushana inscriptions of the above mentioned terms, medieval vowels are seen as in the Mathura style. The Western style of the inscription, earlier we have seen the Eastern style, and what are the important aspects connected with the Western style, we may just see. The Western style of the inscription mostly found from Mathura, but this style was also found from Sanchi and Eastern Malwa region. The Shaka Kshatrapas, as we have seen above, introduced a system of writing with tapering verticals, which further developed during the period of the Kushanas. And the medial I is simplified and Anuswara is shown with a short line. You find with the two dots vertically arranged and another stroke is added. That's how a change is taking place. Instead of the three dots which you have seen in the earlier Mauryan phase, there is a slight departure from the earlier method of marking. Some letters which had vowel appendages have now a triangular base, such as Kha, Ma, Va, which you have seen above. How earlier letters we had this circle or cursive appendages become angularized in the case of Kha, Ma, Va, and Na. Na and Na, they have their bases bent. Earlier in the Mauryan Brahmi, they were just a horizontal line, but in the subsequent period you find the lower line, the lower base line is bent, is shown, and it gains further momentum during the subsequent period. Now, let us see during the Gupta period how Brahmi underwent. There are certain important centers are noticed here or recognized here. The North Indian style had its center at Kaushambi. This is occasionally been called the Middle Ganga Valley or Kaushambi style. And Eastern Indian style we have Bengal and Bihar. And in the Western style we have Mathura. Malwa style predominantly having the slight box-ended characters we see in the Madhya Pradesh, that is Central India, and this later led to the further progression you find during the Vakatakas. So in the Central India, the Malwa style, you find mainly the head mark. And further, the Gujarat area also produced their own distinct style. So during the Gupta period, you find a lot of changes taking place. In addition to this, we have, as we know, along with our tradition, culture, the Indian script traveled abroad, and we have a large number of inscriptions reported from not only from Sri Lanka, Burma and other places, but from the Southeast Asia. We have Cambodia, there are inscriptions from Sri Lanka and all. So as I said, along with our tradition, religion and culture, the script also traveled beyond seas. When we look into the earlier history of the countries like Ceylon and Burma and Southeast Asian countries, is replete with the impact of Indian culture and tradition. The Sri Lanka, Ceylon, because of the maritime activities, it all started with the business. The merchant started moving. So initially it was a trade business, and subsequently they carried along with them the literature, the script with them. The maritime activities were so intense and active, there was a great interaction between different neighbors. One such country is Sri Lanka. The earliest inscriptions of Sri Lanka have been compared with Ashok and Brahmi. All the earlier inscriptions are like that. When we compare the inscriptions of both the countries, Indian styles change from time to time with new technical advances, whereas the older forms tended to survive in Sri Lanka. So in Indian context it changed, but in Sri Lanka it remained. Another country is Myanmar, Burma. The early styles of writing in Burma can be categorized into three groups which have great resemblance with Indian style of writing. And as we know, countries of Southeast Asia lie on the route of eastern commerce and trade, and there is a constant maritime activities resulted. As you know, it was a greater India. Now we have been separated. We call Pakistan, Dhaka, Burma and other. In the historical period, it was one big country. It was greater India, nothing but you see all the Indian tradition, culture, it was reflected in wholesome, full manner in those countries. So during the 4th and 5th century was a pan-Indian script and Sanskrit became a major language. And that you are seen in the inscriptions from Cambodia, Java, Sumatra and Borneo and many other countries of South India, Southeast Asia, you have a large number of Sanskrit inscriptions. And we especially see the influence of Kadamba, Pallava writing on many of the inscriptions of Southeast Asia. This clearly shows the richness of our culture, tradition, language and script which traveled far and wide. Now the evolution of Brahmi script from, you may just see in the beginning, they have been classified into six different phases. The first is the Mauryan phase, where you see the vowel A is shown with a vertical stroke and arms on either side, and sometime the upper arm will be cursive and the lower arm will be angular. Sometimes the lower will be cursive, the upper will be angular. And in the Shungan phase, you find there is a gap in between the curve. The upper is angular and the lower again is the cursive. And the Kushan phase, you find a small head mark is seen on the left limb of the letter, and the Kshatrapa also, and the Gupta altogether, little changes you see. And the Vakataka phase, another you see the box being attached to the left side of the limb. And similarly the A, you find in the middle of the left side vertical, a stroke is attached, and this is seen in all the cases, and even with the Vakataka also. The vowel E, we find changes from the Kushan, where you see apart from the dots, you find the two dots arranged one below the other, and another vertical stroke is added to the side. And the total change you see during the Vakataka, where a cursive form is shown with the two dots at the end. And vowel U is similar in all the phases, except in the Gupta you find little cursiveness, and during the Vakata period you find box attached to the left side. Please students always remember the box will be attached to the left side of the limb of the letter. And another letter is A. This is very simple, and the change you notice only during the Vakataka period. Now coming to the consonants. Earlier it was a simple vertical stroke with a horizontal line running across, and you find change during the Kshatrapa where the head mark is seen, and not only that they extend the lower vertical, it is also called a dagger variety because this is there. And the Gupta form you have seen, and the Vakataka period a box is added on the top of the vertical. And the Ka is with a stroke, and you find the changes coming in the course of time. And the letter Ga, almost on the subsequent period, the left limb will be shorter. They kept on elongating the right side stroke. And Gha is also more or less same. And the Cha, you find the notice changes. It is also called the beaked variety when it comes to the Gupta phase. And Cha, Ja, these are the other forms Next we will see the another consonants. Jha, ta, there are certain consonants which have not undergone any change over the period of time, right from 3rd century BC. Only you find changes on the 7th century. Those are the letters are called ta and tha, and da you find some changes, dha and na also you find the lower base which I explained earlier, the lower base gets slightly bent and altogether a different form you see during the Gupta period, open mouthed na it is called, and a different variety altogether during the Vakataka phase. And the ta, during Mauryan phase it was angular, and subsequently during Kshatrapa period it becomes cursive, and the left limb being shorter and the right is extended. So this is a prominent feature. As far as tha is concerned, there is no change. Dha is, you may see, na, pa. Ma, and during Mauryan phase, ba is a simple squarish form. And in the subsequent period, like Kshatrapa, you find a small dent is seen on the left side of the limb and more prominently seen in the Vakataka period. Bha is arm-chaired bha, and a sudden change, departure take place in the Kshatrapa phase, where not only head mark appears, but it is slightly cursive. And the ba is like Taurine symbol, it's a cursive variety, but it changes during Kshunga. Both the forms are available, the angular as well as cursive form. And during Gupta period, ba is written, it is called a tiled ba. There is a sudden change, the lower limb is compressed and a horizontal lies in form. And during the Vakata period, the lower limb gets shifted to the left side and a box is attached to the left side of the limb. Similarly, the tripartite ya, which we see in the Mauryan alphabet, and it changes. You see the Kushana period, the left curve becomes gently curved is shown, and during the Gupta period also you find the head mark appearing and the box is attached on the left side during the Vakara period. Ra as a whole, there is no much change. They appear in two forms. One is in serpentine form, another is a vertical stroke. La also, you find during the Mauryan period, you find the right limb being extended, but during the subsequent period, as per this one, they become equalized. Va and the Sha, you may see that Shankara Sha, just like an arrowhead it appears, and during the subsequent period like Kushan, it becomes a horseshoe type where a horizontal line is running across, it is attaching both the limbs. And another stroke you find during the Kushana phase, Sha and this are thing. Sha is a Shanmukha Sha. The next one what you see is Sha, and during the Kushan phase you find the horizontal stroke slightly bent connecting both the limbs. And during the Kshatrapa phase, a short dash you see above. And the Sa, dental Sa, how it was during the Mauryan phase, and you may see the Gupta phase, a looped Sa is formed. And during the Vakataka period, a box is attached. And Ha is the another form which you see, and how it was during the Mauryan phase, Shunga, Kushan, Kshatrapa, and Gupta and Vakataka. This is broad outlines of different forms, the evolutionary process which has taken place during this 3rd century BC to 4th or 5th century are shown in this chart. So here are very few select inscriptions are shown, and this is the very famous Rimindi pillar inscription. It reads Devanam Piyena Piyadasina Lajina Visati Vasavisitena Ata Na Agacha Mahiyate Hida Buddha Jate Sakya Munite Sila Vigada Bhikacha Ahite Sila Thave Cha Usapapite Hida Bhagavata Jatite Lumbini Game Ubalike Kate Atha Bhagiyecha. This is a very beautiful, on a well polished inscription. It is there. Of course, though is a doctored copy, but it's very beautiful, and that we can see in this inscription. Digali Sagar Pillar inscription and Calcutta Bairat Rock Edict of Ashoka, and this Sahagora. As you know, in the 3rd century BC, very important, other than the rock edicts, very few inscriptions have come to light. One is the Sahagora, and this one we have already seen above, Mathura inscription of Sodasa, which mainly shows the departure from the Mauryan phase. How with the introduction of the pen technique, you see the letters taking altogether a different form. So this is a very important thing. And some more inscriptions are there here belonging to the Kushana period. And these are, of course, again Kushana inscription, and a few inscriptions are shown belong to the Gupta period. And this Udaygiri cave inscription of Chandragupta II belonged to the regnal year 82, and Udaygiri cave inscription of Chandragupta, and Mandasore inscription of Raravarman, the Krita year 461, and Karamdanda stone inscription of Kumaragupta the first, year 117, and the very famous, very important record, Allahabad pillar inscription of Samudragupta. So thus you could get a glimpse of all the important inscriptions, milestone inscriptions, which clearly reflect the changes that has taken place over the period from 3rd century BC to 5th century. Just to summarize, early epigraphical records are found throughout the length and breadth of the country, mainly engraved in Brahmi script, though the other script also being Kharoshti. Apart from being a major script, it was a pan-Indian script with a long history of evolution, beginning from 3rd century BC to 12th century AD. It may be noted that with the introduction of pen technique, by the end of the Christian era, by the Kshatrapa Samvata, a paradigm shift takes place in the art of writing. Further, with the advancement of knowledge of Brahmi script, more and more people, local rulers, started using the script, with the result that more and more regional variations started appearing. Initially during Kushana period, and regional varieties are seen subsequently in the eastern and western varieties. Subsequently, during the Gupta period, more and more varieties are seen in the inscriptions engraved in Brahmi characters. All along the tradition, culture, late Brahmi script too traveled beyond the sea, and inscriptions from Sri Lanka, Burma, Java, Sumatra, Cambodia, etc., they bear clear testimony to the fact not only our culture traveled, even the script too. Thus, the knowledge of paleographical feature of Brahmi is absolutely essential to understand and appreciate, to decipher our glorious past, our large number of inscriptions which have come down to us. So, paleography knowledge is absolutely important for deciphering inscriptions from different regions belonging to different periods. Yes.